I'm first generation UK. I'm born in the UK to Jamaican parents. My nan in particular was always very much, you have to work hard, you have to work harder than everybody else. You can't rest.
That's a perfect example of a money script that many of us have been told, particularly immigrant communities where working hard is the ticket to wealth. Mind you, in the US, there's a lot of people who are making a lot of money without trading time for dollars. At some point, we need to make our money work for us. Once you understand and realize that the traditional systems in place are designed, they are not broken. They're doing exactly what they intended to do, which is to keep us broke, to keep us poor, to keep us uneducated, and to keep us divided. I say this again specifically to women. Our best defense against these forces that were designed for us to stay kind of subservient is to practice and build our own financial resilience and freedom.
Boom.
A lot of people are familiar with the wage gap, but less is talked about, and there's not even a lot of great stats around the wealth gap. The most recent I could find was it said that women own 32 cents to the dollar of what men own. Yet we live longer. And I went to my husband one day and I was just like, you don't work 3 times harder than me, so why do you get 3 times more money on average just because you have a different organ between your legs and I do?
What does it take to be a financially empowered woman? And what can financially empowered women do together to change the world? A shocking statistic is that around 400,000 women in Australia are at risk of homelessness. And the cause of this is the lack of education about how to build a financial foundation, starting even before we first enter the workforce and well into our retirement years. My name's Dion Payne, and I'm the founder of the Financially Empowered Women podcast. I'm passionate about ending homelessness, and as part of that passion, I chose to look at the systemic barriers that are causing homelessness for women in the first place. The Financially Empowered Women podcast is designed to bring you the best experts from around the world to increase your financial know-how and give you practical and women-specific tips to overcome the challenges you might be facing, such as how to negotiate a better salary, demystifying super, or how to navigate a separation and ensure the assets are distributed fairly. My role is to provide you with the best information out there to change your trajectory and become a financially empowered woman, because you deserve it, and the world needs you more than ever to own your worth and help others to do the same.
Hello and welcome to the Financially Empowered Women podcast. Today I'm really delighted to be here with Bernadette Joy. Now Bernadette is the CEO of Crush Your Money Goals, a personal finance company serving up education with a side of pizzazz. A top journalist featured in Forbes, CNBC and CNET, and has appeared on over 50 podcasts, national radio shows and TV shows as well. Now Bernadette has a book called Crush Your Money Goals, and it was actually named one of Oprah's top 10 books for personal growth in 2025. Bernadette coaches hundreds nationwide, sharing her 5-step secret recipe for ditching debt, mastering savings, and investing for financial peace. Welcome, Bernadette.
Hello, thanks so much for having me.
It's a pleasure. Now, I came across you because I was reading something and your story just sounded so fascinating. And I don't want to do a spoiler, but I'd love to hear from you how you got to the point where you are now.
Thank you. The synopsis is I was $300,000 of debt 10 years ago, and that included all the debts that I think most people can relate to. Here in the U.S., we have student loans, maybe mortgage, credit cards, car loans, and I was just completely overwhelmed and burned out and thought to myself, is this what the next, 40 to 50 years of my life, is this what it's going to look like? And I resolved January of 2016 that I was going to give it my best shot to pay off initially my $72,000 of student loans first. And then it led into paying off my mortgages. It led into investing. It led into starting my own business. And so if you asked me 10 years ago, would you imagine where my life is now? I would have been just like, I just want to get out of the paycheck to paycheck mentality. So that was the 10-year journey. But before that, I was growing up in New York City as a first-generation Filipino American, the 8th of my dad's 9 kids. So no inheritances. A lot of talk of there's not enough money here, and so alongside this journey, I have spent a lot of time unpacking my own financial trauma and healing my money wounds. And thanks to Crush Your Money Goals, I get to do that with a lot of people from all over the world.
Wow. Okay, I want to take each of the different pieces of that because that's really cool. Now, I'm the eldest of 6 kids, and I understand that there's never enough money to go around. And so, yeah, in terms of inheritances, it's like, yeah, there's not much there. It's got to be split between 6 kids. And so, I knew that if I wanted to change my situation financially, it was definitely down to me. I'm curious, though, what were the thoughts and feelings that you had? So you were $300,000 in debt. What were the thoughts and feelings that you had that went, okay, this is enough, like this has got to change?
I didn't know it at the time, but later on I was diagnosed at times with clinical depression and anxiety. At the time I thought I was just sad and I just thought that I was tired. And in hindsight, when I look back on it, it was actually to the point where it was not only affecting my mental health, it was actually affecting my physical health as well. And so I have what I would consider to be a relatively, like minor, like ongoing condition, eczema, where, your skin just gets really inflamed. And I was just, if you saw pictures of me 10 years ago, I was bright red all the time. Like people would ask me, they thought I had a sunburn, or if I had, like if I had just like a really bad facial or something. And I was just stressed to the point that my face was bright red all of the time. And for the longest time, I thought it was just a skin condition, but so much of it was induced by this stress. And one of the kind of flexes that I have now is that, today, 10 years later, I feel more comfortable to even go on platforms like this without any makeup on, where 10 years ago, I was like slathering on anything you could put on my face to cover up what turned out to be very deep-rooted anxiety and stress.
Yeah. Look, thank you for sharing that, because you're right. When we have financial stress, it does bring up body conditions as well. And it's really important to recognize that it just compounds on itself. So you might have stress here, you don't eat so well, you don't sleep so well, you get medical conditions, and then it's just this ever increasing spiral until you decide to change it. So you actually did something really amazing. You got to the root cause of what was happening for you, and you realized that it was stress. That's really cool. You talked about healing your money wounds. Not many people would talk in terms of that, so it's really lovely to hear you say that. But can you explain a little bit more to the audience? What do you mean?
So I have 3 degrees. 2 of them are in business and 1 of them is in psychology. And it turns out that the psychology degree was a lot more useful in navigating my personal finance journey than my business degrees. And I say that because I learned a couple of really key principles. One is that our brain is used for processing, not storage. And so a lot of folks store, whether they're helpful or not, these money scripts that make us fearful of actually making choices that might put our finances in the direction of becoming independent one day. And the other concept that I think most people are familiar with is around the different fear responses. So there's fight, there's flight, right? And there's freeze. But then there's a 4th one that a lot of people don't know, which is fawn. And I kind of describe that as, how do I say this, is a lot of people do that with me sometimes, that I have coaching clients who are saying, oh yeah, everything's great, I feel awesome, and like I'm gonna crush all my money goals, and inside they're dying and they're not telling anybody.
Yeah.
Right? Whereas like we understand what fight looks like, we kind of understand, a lot of us understand what flight looks like. It's like close close the books. We're going to pretend this is not happening. And then freeze often shows up as analysis paralysis, as in, oh, I won't invest until I know the exact right, perfect thing to invest in. And so what I found was that there was a lot of discussion in personal finance around fighting. And so you can see that on, like Twitter or on Instagram saying, I wake up 5 a.m. every day and I have this most perfect routine and it's just all about motivation. But there was not a lot of conversation specifically for women around these other fear responses, which were totally valid and undermined. And not really address that there are just unique challenges for women, and I would say communities of color in particular, where a lot of our fears are based off of our own experiences and how we walk in the world. And so when I talk about healing your money wounds, in the book I talk obviously from the perspective of me being a first generation Filipino American living in the US, but what I've been told by a lot of people who've read the book now is that they can identify with different parts of the fears that we talk about that often hold us back from making good financial choices.
Yeah, I can see that. Just to relate it to my upbringing, I'm first generation UK. I'm born in the UK to Jamaican parents, and so there was a lot around. My nan in particular was always very much, you have to work hard, you have to work harder than everybody else, you can't rest. And so even though I consciously look at that and go, well, yeah, there's an element of truth in that, but I've probably worked way harder than I needed to. It's still that internal message that I got when I was sort of before 7 years old, and I still operate from that. So those things that we do learn really early on, they do factor in our lives later on, and unless we decide to make the decision to change them, it can be quite detrimental.
Yes. And, I get that that's a perfect example of a money script that many of us have been told, particularly immigrant communities where, working hard is the ticket to wealth. Mind you, in the US, there's a lot of people who are making a lot of money without trading time for dollars. And so that's something that I constantly have to work on in terms of coaching other people in my programs, is that we actually have to unravel and unpack a little bit of that. Well, actually, yeah, we have to work hard to a certain point, but at some point we need to make our money work for us, which we've all heard before. But if we keep saying that the first and best option is for us to keep trading our blood, sweat, and tears for this money, then we are more likely to use that as a crutch versus going outside of what we are uncomfortable about, which is investing in resources and things that could potentially give us a lot more return in the long run, but might feel like lazy or might feel too passive. And often I have to tell, especially women, I actually just taught an investing class this past week, and I had to say that to them, just so you know, the dollar that you work for is not worth any more than the dollar that you made from investing. And that one concept really, it took a minute for people to understand what I was even saying.
It's the same value.
But we somehow assign more morality or more acceptance of money that we worked for versus money that we got without, working so hard.
Yeah. So why do you think then that it's so easy for people to go into debt? What's the money stories that are running there?
I feel like I could go on about this topic. My name is Bernadette Joy, after all, so debt is in my name. And, I think I was destined to be in debt at some point, just, kismet, right? But I can't speak for everybody. I think there's obviously a lot of factors that play into it. But specifically, why I got into a lot of debt was following the kind of script that said that this was how a proper adult operates, meaning a proper adult buys a home, a proper adult has a car, a proper adult gets lots of education, a proper adult looks nice and wears nice clothes, and all of those things added up. And then I would say to a lesser degree, and I'm so curious to hear what it's like in your side of the world, but in the US, there's also a lot of debt that is just due to, we have a very poor healthcare system here. And so I see a lot of clients who, through no fault of their own, have gotten into medical debt, who have gotten into debt for being pregnant and having to deliver a baby. I mean, that's why I say there's so many factors here. But at least in the debt side of where it's more directly correlated to behavior, meaning I thought that in order to get all these things that debt was the answer to it. And at least in the US, the other thing that I have a really strong opinion about is the oversaturation of like credit card marketing, which makes it very easy for people to get into a lot of debt quickly at rates that used to be considered like payday loan rates. And now, for the fact my client actually just posted an Instagram of like how her credit card showed that if she missed a payment, it would go up to like 33% interest rate. And I'm like, that should not even be legal, in my opinion. But here we are.
So it's almost as if there's a conditioning that's happening that is making it easier to get into debt, because then you're stuck and you're in this hamster wheel trying to keep the wolf from the door, essentially.
That's right. I mean, it's systemically, I've said this last week because I was just very frustrated with kind of the current economic and political environment in the US. And I, said to folks, I said,
it's an interesting time, isn't it?
It's a very interesting time. I think it's always an interesting time, but it feels like, I don't know if just because it's so much easy access to like know what's going on in real time, but I said to many of my clients, I said, once you understand and realize that the traditional systems in place are designed, they are not broken. They're doing exactly what they intended to do, which is to keep us broke, to keep us poor, to keep us uneducated, and to keep us divided. Because it is easier to control a population who, isn't literate, doesn't have the resources, has to go to work every day, doesn't have the energy to fight. And so I said, I say this again, specifically to women, our best defense against, these forces that, were designed for us to stay kind of subservient is to practice and build our own financial resilience and freedom.
Boom.
Can you tell I feel some type of way today? I'm just like, we're having this conversation.
You're not holding back, are you? And I love that. It's really refreshing. Please don't stop doing that, because we need to hear the truth. This is really important. When we look at what's happening, particularly, it's happening for a lot of people. It's happening in marginalised communities. It's happening for women. I just happen to be focusing on women at the moment. But if we don't know the truth, then we can't change the situation. That's it.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So you obviously spent the time, spent the energy to turn your life around, which is amazing, and now you help other people do the same. So how do you do that? What are the sort of 3 top tips that you have when people work with you?
Yeah, so the book that I have out right now, it is the gift that I'm trying to give to as many people as possible, where I used to get all of these pick my brain. Oh, let me, can I ask you a couple questions? And I'm like, well, I've literally written everything down for you in one spot. And it's $18 US, so it's really not, cost prohibitive. And I would say what has been so interesting, I'll say this. I could always say what I think is useful, but I just looked today and we've passed my first milestone of 1,000 books sold. And the feedback that I've got, thank you. The feedback I've gotten consistently is most people did not realize that this book was going to hit them in the face the way that it does. And in the book, I specifically talk about CRUSH, your money goals. The acronyms are the 5 kind of overarching ideas that I think are helpful for everybody. But then there's 25 habits, and I don't expect that everyone would do all 25 habits, but the idea is to pick one habit from each of those sections, one habit from C, R, U, S, H. And what's been interesting to me is that consistently I have gotten feedback from folks that what they found so helpful so far is Number one, the way that I approach budgeting, which is a lot more simplified and a lot less tedious than I think a lot of other people treat budgeting. And the major emphasis on that is I actually focus a lot more on intention versus tracking. If you set good intentions with your money up front, then you don't have to track as many expenses on the back end. And a lot of women in particular get inundated or just give up on budgeting because it's just a task. It becomes a tedious task of just like, spreadsheets and stuff. So that's one thing, is to look at the way that I do budgeting, which is into 3 kind of specific buckets. And then the second tip that a lot of people really, really love is, in the US anyway, it's called I call it the dollar rule. And it's something very simple to say, if something is going to cost $1 per use, then you have permission to buy it, which is like the opposite of what a lot of people expect of like, being good with money means about sacrificing and beans and rice and like not being able to have nice things. And it's actually the opposite to say, hey, like actually this is a prime example. This turtleneck, I got it on sale for like $22, I think. And my thought process in the store was like, well, will I wear this at least 22 times? If the answer is yes, then like stop overthinking this and like use your brain power for something else that's a much bigger financial choice. So that's a tip that people really love. And then one that I am very, very strong about specifically for women in the book is I talk about making negotiation a habit. And what I find is that most women either avoid negotiating or they find it very scary, or they only do negotiating once they're backed into a corner, which is the worst time for you to negotiate.
That's not a position of power to negotiate from.
Exactly, right? So, kind of like prime example is just like, if you are, let's say, trying to buy a home and you are, your lease is up in 4 weeks and you like got to go somewhere else and you feel this urgency to buy a home now, versus what I did, and which was a good part of my wealth, was I was always looking for the next home way before I needed it. And positioning myself into a position that I could say, hey, I can just walk away from this offer. I'm not going to feel like I have to take this offer or do this because I absolutely am backed into a corner. And so in the book, I give some very specific tips on how to specifically negotiate your income and negotiate your rates, whether you work for someone or if you're someone who is independent or a business owner. And I think if I could implore all women to make negotiation a regular habit versus when they absolutely need to, that would push the needle, I think, so much farther along for women to close the wealth gap.
Yeah, amazing. And that's what it comes down to, that there is a wealth gap, there is a gender pay gap, and that when you start off with the gap, it's like you're sort of starting behind the start line and everybody else is ahead of you. So you've got to be able to close that gap. So you've got to be able to negotiate.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of people are familiar, with the wage gap, but less is talked about, and there's not even a lot of great stats around the wealth gap. The last one I saw that was the most recent I could find was about it said that women own 32 cents to the dollar of what men own, yet we live longer. Generally, we live like 9 years longer, and we tend to have a lot more health expenses because of child rearing and all of that kind of stuff. And so really what helped me to want to write this book and to help people, as particularly women with finances, was just pure rage at one point. I went to my husband one day and I was just like, you don't work 3 times harder than me, so why do you get 3 times more money on average just because you have, a different organ between your legs than I do? Like, that just doesn't, that doesn't jive with me, right? And so I am very, very passionate about the fact that we have, we've made some progress on the pay and the wage gap, but we are still really, really far behind on the wealth gap, and specifically because we are often afraid to participate in investing or negotiating for larger sums of money.
Yeah. There's something else about your name. You said you had debt in your name, but you also have joy in your name. So how do we as women maintain the joy of attending to our finances and becoming wealthy?
I do. So to deep dive a little bit more into how I do budgeting or how I teach budgeting, it's counterintuitive to what a lot of other personal finance folks teach, which is I have three categories. It's survive, which is what most people think about when budgeting. It's those, basic expenses, transportation, health, housing, utilities, food. And then there's strive, which is everything that would help you grow your net worth. So it's paying down debt, it's saving, it's investing, it's education, anything that's going to improve your odds at becoming financially independent. But then there's this third category that is called revive, and it's anything that is not necessary but still makes life worth living. And what a lot of people are surprised about is that I force my clients to have a revive category, and it has to be meaningful. So if it doesn't go into survive or strive, it usually goes into revive. And that is a very eye-opening exercise for a lot of my clients, because and when they usually start off with me, they're like, oh, well, I'm not going to give up my Amazon or Temu or I don't know, my bubble baths or whatever is the flavor of the week when it comes to self-care. But then we figure it out, like, oh, those things don't actually revive you. Like, you're spending money on it, but it's not actually helping you feel more alive, feel more joyful, And so really that's the category for joy. And so for me, in my revive category, it's, hip hop dance class. It's going to yoga. It's this week, my husband and I are going camping, and we found out that camping is very expensive. Like, all the things that you need to buy for camping. Like, we just did not know that because we've never gone camping before. And so it's usually a lot more experiences rather than material things. And so I say all that to say is that I'm really asking women in 2025 specifically to reevaluate this revive category for them. Are you, again, just following a script of like, oh yeah, clothing makes me happy or what? And it could. And if the answer is yes, great. But chances are, because I've done this now with hundreds and hundreds of people, whenever I ask people, what are you going to do when, not if, but when you become financially free? No one ever says to me, I'm going to buy more clothes. I'm going to buy more shoes. I'm going to buy more, knickknacks for the house. They say, I'm going to travel. I'm going to hang out with friends. I'm going to learn a new language. So why not put some of those things in here now versus after you retire?
Yeah. Bernadette, this has been so much fun. Thank you. And it's been inspiring. It's gone way deeper than I thought that we were going to go. I think the biggest takeaway for me is just around that joy piece and around having that revive category, because I can see that when you're putting money away and it can get quite serious. I'm saving for this, I'm saving for that. But if you're also putting money to revive yourself, it's very intentional, it's very nurturing, it's very all about self-care. And so why wouldn't you invest more into that?
I love that. I'm glad that you took that away from this conversation, and I've really enjoyed meeting you, and I'm excited for us to continue hopefully supporting one another and for many more years.
Amazing. And I am just going to do a little bit of a plug for your book. It sounds amazing. So if anybody would like to get a copy of that, they can just come to your website.
Yes, it's Crush Your Money Goals. And the website is crushyourmoneygoals.com. And it's available at most of your major retailers. I always ask people to request it at your local bookshop to support small business owners. And it's also available in audiobook.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Bernadette. And I'll have that in the show notes for the show when it goes live as well. Wonderful. Thank you. Lovely to have you.
Awesome. Thank you so much.